yours truly. We're back. It's a very cold, dreary, gray day with, we had a little bit of snow earlier, and then it started raining. It's been a very warm winter so far this year for this area. That we got a couple of 1 foot snowfalls our first winter, and then the second winter was less, and now we're doing this. This is as much. We had one other day that had about an inch or two of snow maybe, and I'm always disappointed if it's not snowing. If it's going to be that cold, you may as well be enjoying some snow. But no, not today. So I'm going to cover a few different things today. I'm going to start with a quick tip though, and let me get organized here because I'm clearly not organized yet. Get my little live stream logo up, and now I want to show you this track and a couple of things that I do when I'm dealing with the old, let's see where that's, there I am, the old Dr. Octarex. So I'm going to do a quick edit here. Let's go over to the rack and see what's going on, and I'll tell you the story about this track. So I'm using separate outputs for Dr. Octarex. Don't often do that, don't often need to, but on this one I felt like it was going to make it a little bit easier. I'm using a fairly cliche little loop there, but it's got a conga in it. Let me just show you the whole loop here. Got it bust here. Alright, there's some modular stuff going on in the background too. Ignore that. And so one of the advantages to doing separate outputs, so I've got the kick, the snare, hats, and the congas. Now obviously there's hat in the kick and the snare as well. But let me just show you here. Okay, that's another issue. I'm using a reverb send on the, right there on, can I do that? Yeah. On the redrum, something else I don't do often, but that's meaning that I've got a little bit of bleed because that doesn't go away when you solo something. So I wonder, well, I could just, oh no, I can't hit stop because I've gone pattern to track. Okay, I don't know what the answer to that would be. Oh, I guess I could just mute that and it'll go away. Then I'll be confused later, but I'll deal with that. There's my kick. Kind of lowered the decay a little bit. That's the full length that kind of cuts off abruptly. So that's tip number one, especially with these longer samples, is to bring the decay down and usually release at the same time. Since we don't know how long the note is, that'll ensure it's the same. So I separated these. This was luckily a very easy one. I have to turn that off. So the kick drum goes out to the main outs. The hi-hats go to 3/4, the snares go to 1/2, and then the congas, wherever they are, go to 5/6. Now there's some congas playing when right there. 1, 2. The congas on the snare on 2 has a conga on it. So what I would do is come over here. Now I've done this in blocks, so it's going to make it a little tricky. Come on, there we go. I want to change all of these, but it's going to be really tedious if I try to do it all in blocks and copy it all out. So what I can do instead is just come out here and paste it in. Oh, it went over there. Paste it in on top of a block. Then we'll come in and say, play that one. Why is it not playing? Oh, because I've got stuff soloed. And reminds me, let's undo that mute before that gets me in the butt later. And that's the snare with the conga. That's the snare without. Hold down shift so it doesn't slide. Put it there. Now I've got the beat the way I want it. Just now I would have to copy it all over. Not a bad thing. But by putting it on top, and I can do that too, go faster. By putting it on top of the existing one, it'll play instead. In fact, you can see I've done the trick. I can't even remember who came up with this first. It certainly wasn't me. Where you put the blank clip, you just basically draw a clip wherever you want to mute out something in the existing block. And so, for example, this block here that's the lavender color, I mute it the first time and I let it play the second time for the chunks track. Chunks in C, we'll get to that in just a second. So the other thing I do is, because I wanted to get rid of that conga, I can do it now just by doing that. The other thing I can do, I put reverb just on the congas. I could do that on the snare too if I wanted to do something. And of course, because they are all in separate channels, they all have the ability to EQ. The hi-hat has some de-harshing going on. I liked the lo-fi effect, so I took some top end off, which I hardly ever do, especially on drums, but there's 2 drum tracks going on here, so. And then each one also has its own light SSL compression. This is, for those who know me, the setting I use all the time on drums. High ratio, fast release, threshold to get just 1 LED, which is already 3 dB of gain reduction. So I don't know when exactly it clicks on, when you get all the way up to 3 or when you get halfway, or I don't know, but just that little bit. And then again, sometimes if I'm feeling feisty, I'll put some on the bus as well, so double compressed. And this is all of the default settings. I'm not using peak or fast attack. So it's letting the transient through. It's adding a little bit of attack to the kit sound. And that's what's going on with that loop. And then I have this guy. This is just adding some brightness and top end. A constant hi-hat. Actually, it's not constant. It stops. And that's it for the drums. And Reason fans will be happy to know the bass is Subtractor factory preset bass guitar. Ain't nothing like it. When it works, it works. I mean, there are things like it, but this was a quick song, and I'll tell you the history of the song real quick. So I just needed quick sounds. What I typically do when I'm trying to come up with something new, I will use an instrument that I haven't used in a while. So I haven't used Mimic in a while, and that's how this song started. This was the first thing I played. Now this has got a few different things going on. Let me go ahead and hit stop. Let's see. I don't hear nothing. I'm not sure why I don't. What happened? Happens. It happens. So I'm seeing some. Oh, I've done something here, I think, with the faders on the controller, unfortunately. Might be messing with my sounds. I'm going to go into the block. This is the one thing I don't like about blocks is, for me personally, I don't use them often, and then when I do, like I haven't used them in months, I'm very slow. So I'm going to be a little clumsy now because of the blocks hurdle thrown in front of me. Now that's playing. I don't understand why the keyboard's not playing. It is now. Ah. Who knows? Okay, so that's just going back and forth between a D and an E. Now the rest of the sounds in this patch that's it. I didn't use any of these others. I just used these three. But as soon as I started playing that, I'm like, that's hooky. I want to build on that. So that's what I did. I played this whole part here all the way through. You can see it's just some variations. It's not a strict. And that became the first phrase. Then I added that kit. And then I added the hip hop kit. Then I started in with the bass line after that. Well, the other thing that the hip hop kit does, and these are all factory sounds by the way, is provides, if you're listening on a system that can hear it, some nice hefty bottom end. You see it drops out there. So this kit, Dr. Octarex, is my lo-fi kit. It's kind of more focused in the middle of the spectrum. No super highs and no super lows. And then this one has the full crispness of the top end for the hi-hats and the claps, and the extra bottom end on the kick drum. And now let's get out of that. Let's just skip ahead. Then once I had all the pieces together, I was able to arrange it, which is my favorite use of blocks. Something I used to do with Studio Vision Pro all the time was build all these sections like you can do with Live, and then arrange them after the fact, and then further arrange them by making modifications. For example, now that you know what the main little hook does, you'll hear her that this time it doesn't have the answer, so it just does dun, 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 dun. Nothing else, nothing else. These are muted out here just by drawing a clip over the top, and the same thing on further on down. And I did it to mute out the very last note that was played, a little pickup note at the end of that track. This is the organ from Universal Audio, the waterfall organ, and because we are now in VST3 land, I can actually bring my UAD plugins, my newer Native Instrument plugins, and the one I'm going to show you next, which is an analyzer plugin. But this is really a sweet V3 model. It's my current favorite. I also have Arturias, but I'm leaning towards this. I still really miss Native Instruments B4. Not quite sure why that one died. Maybe there was a licensing issue. There didn't seem to be any technical reason. It was very well received, I thought. But you move on. Speaking of which, you're probably tired of this little groove for a while. I will be following up on this though, because I've sent it off to a new friend in Nigeria who's gonna add some vocals, and I've been doing a mix for him, so he's doing a vocal for me on this track, and it's kind of fun. The joy of the internet is the interconnection of the world, the planet. Being able to have my software co-developer in New Zealand working for a company in Sweden, collaborating with people in Finland and UK and across the country here and now in Africa. So it's something I only dreamed about doing even 20 years ago. I remember thinking, oh, I can't move outside of Nashville because I won't have any work. And then within 5 years, I was outside of Nashville and I had plenty of work. So things change quick sometimes. Let's look at something else here. Let's look at this analyzer I was telling you about. I'm going to use it to just demonstrate a few basic concepts, but it's Bertum EQ Curve Analyzer. It is a pay what you want. I think I paid him $10 a couple of different times because I liked it so much. What this does very quickly is it sends out a sine sweep. So you have a very high resolution display. Keep forgetting to keep open. And we can turn on and off different parts. And I just discovered recently, it's fully resizable too, so that's nice. I just discovered recently that you can run 2 different versions of it and see, so this is group 2 and then the underlay is 1, which was the first one I put in over here in the left column. And it allows you to compare 2 curves together and see if I do it right. Let's see. Did I mess up something? I must have. Because it should be... Oh, wait. Oh, there we go. I didn't mess up anything except for I forgot to turn this up. Forgot to actually put EQ on it. So let's turn that off and make this even bigger. Because we can. And this is great for looking at 2 different EQs to see what's the same or different about them. What it also can show you, let's do a little bit of work here. Let's see, I'm going to try to match these 2 curves, and then we're going to go into the phase display. Let's see. Oh, almost got it there. And here, now a lot of times, we'll see what this says, but a lot of times when you match front panel settings, you don't really get the same curve. I'm not quite exact as I have been in the past using this, but that's very close. So according to this, we're at 1K, 1.1K over there, and with this one we are at, let's see, beat 3, and that's almost 1.1. So the frequencies are almost the same. The Qs are going to be arbitrary. The gain is 20.3 here and 20 even here, 20 even there. But if you look very closely, you can see that the gray one is right above. So that 20, this should be 20 even for it to match, or 21. Oh, there you go. And you can see there's still a few little places where it's not exactly close, but the main thing I want to do is turn on the phase response, because one of the audio myths that I've heard over the years is that different EQs have different amounts of phase shift for the same amount of EQ, which goes against everything I've learned, because I've learned that it's the phase shift that creates the EQ curve, and that's how you boost or cut a frequency. So how can they have different phase shifts if the curves are the same? I think what happens is people compare 2 different EQs with a just matching the front panel settings, and I'm going to show you why you don't want to do that. And they recognize that the phase curves are different, so it looks like the EQs are doing different amounts of phase. But when you match their curve, if we turn this one off, you'll see underneath my gray curve has a gray phase curve, my green curve has a hot pink phase curve. Have not figured out if I can change the colors yet. I've been having too much fun with other things. For example, there's a little display here that shows you exactly where you are with the crosshair, so I can see this is 20.1 boost. It's 150 degrees of phase shift. The frequency is 1003 wherever I am. pointing at. That doesn't mean that that's where the EQ is tuned to precisely. But you can zoom in and see a lot of detail. And of course I could make this full screen. Then the fact that it's completely smoothly variable in size is very handy. It's very much like the response in Reason, this guy, in that it can be freely resized, but this shows you the actual response of the audio signal going through, whereas the display here, like on my coloring EQ, is showing me the math behind the curve that it should superimpose on the audio. This is actually audio passing through and being analyzed and being reconstructed to show us the actual curve. So we see that these are the same when they are the same, which I know sounds redundant. They're the same when they're the same. Yes. Let's turn all those off. So phase equals EQ curve, and we'll see that again and again. Now, let's see if I have the ones I wanted. I've just been piling EQs in here. What I wanted to do was show you that when you set, let's see, oh, I know why. I had soft tube in here. And this one has everything we need. We can turn that off and that off. And I want to turn that off. And actually I can look at just this version over here of the plugin. So this is group 1 with no underlay, and we have more space now. So you can see things like, as soon as I put the soft tube in line, there's already something going on, right? Oh, I did it again. Would it not be a bad thing to have this keep open default to on? I don't know. I think I'd be doing the opposite just as many times as I do what I just did. So just turning this on does something. The level is a tiny bit lower. How much lower? Well, we can line it up. It's a half a dB lower across the board. I don't know why. That's just the program EQ doing something. Let's look at the mid EQ. That has a tiny little boost on it. The compression in. That has a little boost, but if we makeup gain should be able to get us out of that. Yeah. All right, we're not here to look at the compressor. We're here to look at the program EQ because we have two of them to compare. So let's say we look at the low. See, it's defaulted to 60 there. Let's put it 60. I'm going to compare the Kuasa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And the Tube Tech. If we boost the low here, and do I have something else? Yes, I do. Okay, so there's the low boost. First of all, what can we tell by this? Well, we can tell that the maximum boost at 60 is going to be 16 dB. Now, if we want to know what the boost is at 60, 190, 80, 70, 60. Right there, 60 hertz is about 13.5 dB boost. Now, let's do the same thing here. Oh my gosh, I should have set this up differently. I still can. And we have a different curve. Let me just drag this one over here. This should, fingers crossed, should be the best way to do this. Yes, there we go. Okay, so now we can see two different EQs. Now something is going on with the phase with the soft tube, so we'll just ignore that for the moment. Now I can go back here and turn this one back on. Oh, and look what I just did again. Oh, my old friend, keep open. And the size isn't remembered either. Oh, yeah. You'd think I'd learn. You'd think, right? I see I'm not the only person with this problem. Okay, so what we can see immediately is the EVE Eve MP5. I'll just call it MP5 for now. And the Tube Tech are set exactly the same, 60 cycles, full boost, but their curves are different. Let's go to 100 and see. Yep, and so my guess is if I was going to be trying these two, the MP5 over here on the left is the one that's louder. It's, well, up at 100 hertz, it's 13 dB there, and so it's a dB and a half louder over the band where it's pushed. That's a subtle amount, but I've heard people say this one sounds fatter, this one sounds bigger, or whatever, fill in the blank. It sounds better, and I can almost put money on it. I'm almost confident enough, not quite, but almost confident enough to put money on it. It's just louder. The other variable, besides the fact that the curves could be different, could be saturation, which I'll show you how to look at in just a second. Let's look at the famous boost cut curve and see how those are different. Again, the MP5 is louder, so that might be preferable. But if I pull it back, I'll have to pull them both back. Oh, yeah. So can it be done? Well, I would do it by starting with this and this. Now this is getting pretty technical and could be boring, but okay, this is revealing though, because I see that even when I get their boost amount to match, that the MP5 has a higher frequency because it's shifted to the right a little bit on this graph. So that's another reason why you'll hear a slight difference between these two. Now, as far as, we'll have to go into another mode because I want to do this before I forget. This is how I would probably address saturation. Let's reset this device. We're just going to do a sine wave. I'll latch my keyboard here, and now it'll hold the note. And then I can run this through any of these EQs and see by looking at the spectrum analyzer if there's additional saturation added. The thing is, we may need to boost it a little bit sometimes to see that. I'm going to pull the volume down a little because that can be annoying, and we don't need to hear this to test it. So we have this running through here. I don't see any obvious artifacts. Let's push it up a little bit. But let's impose some. Let's intentionally add some so you can see what it looks like. Okay, so all the spikes coming up here are harmonics. If we were to, let's see, we tune this to 60, or to 160 rather. Okay, so you see then our first harmonic, these are octaves by the way, the vertical lines. The first harmonic is an octave, then the second is an octave and a fifth. So we are definitely saturating here. And then you hear, so that's even and odd harmonics here, which is another thing you can see, but now it's favoring odd. So I don't know what happens. You can see what the different EQ settings do. But that's what saturation looks like. So if you see anything there, and I think I need to repeat this though, because there could be artifacts below what we're seeing, it's important that you get the level up enough to be able to see this stuff. And I'm going to go over here and use the thing I hardly ever use, which is that one. And now let's turn it down again so I don't have to see it. I can see there is one little artifact there, but we are crazy loud. We are clipping so that we're beyond what you would ever normally be using. Let's see if this one that we're seeing here goes away. Yes, it does. Okay, just to be clear, we're looking down at the bottom here, right above where it says master section. We're going to turn on this EQ, but not add any EQ. Now let's add in these other sections. Well, maybe it goes up a little bit. I think it actually came down because this level was down. So compressor's not really doing anything, but both EQs are doing a little bit. Well, the whole device is doing a little bit actually. It's not coming from any one section. So there's a little bit of color that when I bypass it disappears. So the Tube Tech is doing something, air quotes. We don't really know what, and it's not doing a lot for sure. Now let's get in here with this one. See if I can make it so I can drag it all the way across. And now let's get rid of that and see the same thing here, and if we can tell what's going on. And I don't see anything, but we have separate controls, so they're giving us control. Oh, and boy, there it is. So it's even more saturation than the Tube Tech, plus we can control it. I don't know what auto is, auto level for saturation. It may be that I can crank the input and it'll link the output, so let's find out. Yes. Okay, so without auto, this should just get louder. Right, okay, good. So auto just means it's compensating. I don't have to bring the output down every time I turn the input up. I like that. And it sounds like it's doing a good job because I don't hear the volume changing. And it's not easy to do because the curves are hardly ever linear. And so we can see that to match what was going on with the Tube Tech, we would have to be way down here, maybe even a little further. Let's remember where it was on the tube. Oh gosh, it was, first of all, it was a different harmonic. It was the third harmonic, the octave and a fifth. And this is first harmonic, or first overtone, second harmonic. Always confused me. I try to just use harmonics. So there's more saturation on the MP5, which also, well, it's not on by default, so maybe you wouldn't be swayed by that. But if you listen, and I'm hearing some little background noise. I don't know if it's broadcasting or not, but I'm hearing it. It could just be my crappy headphone monitoring system right now. This is so subtle, I'm not hearing it. Remember how much I turned the volume up? It's up. It's up 18 dB above this, which is already at the max. It's just one sine wave. I could turn it up even more here, but let's just say it's probably way hotter than we'd ever use it, and I don't hear the saturation. So I'm going to say that even here it's subtle. It's more subtle with the Tube Tech. But these are the things that you can see with visual tools. I was also going to show you, now let's get some quiet again. There are some other things that I find fascinating, totally geeky, and that is the difference between, let's do a couple things here. I think I can show it to you here. Keep open. Smart monkey. Okay, so we can leave that one on. But I want to show you what happens when we do a boost and a cut of equal amounts. We'll bypass that. Because the SSLs are symmetrical and because they're tuned 1.01 rather, 44.1%, 44.1%, because these are identical and this one is minus 20 and this one is plus 20, they cancel out and they make a flat line. As soon as I move any one of these, we'll see a shape appear. And this is not a polarity trick. This is just a boost and an equivalent inverted cut. This is why symmetrical equalizers were invented in the first place. And the option is a asymmetrical, and we have a few of them here. An asymmetrical EQ has more narrow cuts and more wider boosts, which is very natural. The way I learned was you tend to want to do wider boosts and more narrow cuts as a very general rule, because because the opposite doesn't sound good. Narrow boosts can add resonances actually and sound peaky and honky, and it's a great effect, but it's not always musical, and it's hardly ever subtle. And the same thing with wide cuts can just take so much out of the middle of the sound that it sounds very hollow and empty and odd. But narrow cuts tend to work really well. But alas, you cannot make, let's go to equal cut and boost. You cannot make symmetrical cuts and boosts work because they will look like that. And even if I switch to a symmetrical, then why am I still not? Oh, Q, my evil friend Q. There we go. Now we get the same thing. We get a little change when we move away from 0, but otherwise they're canceling each other out. And again, that's symmetrical. When we go to asymmetrical, they do not cancel out. And they look rather interesting though. So maybe there's a use for that. Oh, that's a Pro Tools habit right there. Option to clear something. And because I've been in Luna, that's doing it. So in Reason, you command click to clear a control, reset a control. And Pro Tools, 20 years of habits using Option for the same thing, and now using Luna, that habit is coming back. And in Luna, I keep command clicking to reset things, which doesn't work, obviously. So let's look at one more thing that I find very helpful. There's something that I don't think is important because it doesn't ever bother me, but I can show it to you on the screen. It's called warping. It's a digital EQ phenomenon that when you get close to Nyquist frequency, which is up at the top, the curve will become a little off-centered, and it looks like that. So you can see how this is even a little concave and this is convex. So that's cramping. I don't think it's called warping. I think it's called cramping. And you can see that no matter what, that bottom right where it says F2 right now, that always stays anchored there. So you can use a shelf and get away with stuff that's not going to do that if you need to boost up there and evenly. But what I find interesting is that not every EQ shows you accurately whether they're doing cramping or not, but almost every EQ does it. I'm not here to call anybody out. I would just suggest you see if this display on your EQ matches the curve analyzer version, which is actually showing us what's coming through the system, the audio path. And you may be surprised. Let's look at one that we know here. Does this do cramping? Yes, it does. Of course it does. It's a hard thing to get around. I've seen EQs that do it. I have no idea how they do it. I'll be the first to admit. This goes up higher, but yeah, you can see it still gets a little lopsided. And this part of the curve that's going almost down halfway gets all the way down in half of an octave, and this is like 5 octaves here. So yeah, very lopsided. So that's a fun thing to check out. See what your EQ is actually doing and see if it bothers you, because might be using an EQ that shows you no cramping, but it's actually cramping and you think it sounds good. But does it, or does it just look good? Looks can be deceiving. All right. I think that's about all I was going to cover here. So let's do one last little segment here. I'm going to revisit my old friend, hang on, I'm looking for it. My new friend, what am I saying? The Stream Deck. Oh, first, let's go full screen. This is my current setup now. I've got 3 views for Reason: rack, a mixer, rack, and sequencer. The important thing is what happens. Button crazy. This will switch to the mixer view, obviously. This will switch to the rack view, and this will switch to the sequencer view. The cool thing is it's also switching banks of buttons here. Now, the top row stays the same. That's where the transport is. And some of the others, the bottom row stays the same. Obviously, these 3 have to stay the same. But I'm actually switching to new pages within the profile. And I can show you what that looks like. So I have page 2, 3, and 4 that do this switching. Page 1 and 5 are workspaces, overflow. I'm trying different button layouts, or I'm just storing stuff over here. So how does this work? What does this allow me? Let's look at, I don't know how well you can see this one. I'll switch. So here, this is the mixer layout. I've got things that shouldn't be here, like quantize and grid snap. But select all, MIDI sync, save, 20 dB dim, follow song or not follow song. That wouldn't apply here either. And then click on and off. And then my do-over button is here. And we can also call up the tool window, and any of these other F keys are permanently along the bottom. So there's not a lot going on there because there's not a lot of key commands that apply to the mixer. Anyway, not a lot that I have found yet. In the rack, we have ways to auto route a device. Wow, my view did not change. What happened? Rack, something clicked. Oh, I must be outside of Reason. Now we're back. I can turn this off. In the rack view, I have select all. That didn't do what I thought it would do. That should be Command A. Nope. Well, there's a nice beep telling me, no, it didn't work that time. There's auto route, disconnect device. Let's see. Some of these should be working. Disconnect device. Do I have my key commands? Yes. So let's undo. I'll do it with the rack flip. Disconnect device. I don't think it works. No, reconnect device does not work. But there's an auto route. Okay, let's see if that works. Disconnect device and auto route device. Oh, so close. Gets you halfway there. Reset device, obviously. We'll change all these back to their default. And we already discovered select all doesn't work. MIDI sync just turns the send clock on and off. Right? Oh, I'm not showing you what I wanted to show you. Actually, standby, send clock on and off. I need to be looking at the screen. Click on and off, obviously. I need to add one for the pre-count, and then my do-over button and the save and arrow buttons. I've also got another handy little button that was I thought didn't work at first, and I was very happy to find out it did work. And that is the zoom. So right now we are at 120 zoom. And when I press it, it switches us to 200% zoom. Did I press the right one? I'm always getting, it's the first time it's going to take a second. And so the button is a toggle button, and it'll go back and forth between the two zoom modes. And the toggle button has two states, and one of them says 120%, and the other one is just black with 200% app zoom. Oh, and one of them is all caps, and one of them is lowercase. I like the all caps, so let's edit that because it's easy to do. Oh, we don't want to hit return. All right, now when I click on them, they ought to be correct. Both will be all caps, but let me switch to the full screen here. I did the wrong button. Yes, all caps, all caps. And then this is not working if I'm not clicking back here. There we go. Now it's working. There's still obviously things like that. If I'm not in Reason, some of the buttons that use key commands won't work. Luckily, there's the whole section that uses Mackie control, like for hitting play and stop. And that works even if I'm in another app. Of course, now, if you notice, the Stream Deck just moved because it's following the app. I have Console as an app, and it's set to follow the app. So let's go back to Reason and watch what happens here. It comes back to Reason. Now let's go somewhere that is not Reason. And I can still hit play even though I'm not in Reason because it's using MIDI, Mackie control over MIDI. And so that will always work. That is a problem, though, when I'm running Luna and Reason together because they both want to hit play at that point because they're both reading Mackie control. So I have to go and actually shut one off. And in Reason, you would come in and turn Mackie control off here. I've got a device for that. And that would automatically shut me off. That's not a big deal, but I'm not often running the two where I need the transport and the full controls for both. So that's easy to work with. And then I was going to show you this and accidentally showed you too soon. This is a folder. And I've just typed load devices above and below the icon. But this takes me to a folder of whatevers. And in this case, is all shortcuts for devices. So if I wanted to add Thor, I would just click somewhere in the rack and then add Thor. If I want to put a redrum in, say over here, there's my redrum. Of course, I might want a Selig product as well. And then here's the reason why I have my transport buttons on the top, because the only place for the exit of a folder is the upper right hand corner. I cannot move that around. So since I have to have those navigators there, I'm going to keep the page navigators here that also, when I get to one end, take me back out with the home key back to my home setup. And I think I had this, but I'm not sure if I had this set up already the last time I showed this off. I have it so that now I can go, let's leave Reason here once again. I can come back to Reason this way by hitting plus Reason. So the top button here calls up Reason on this panel, but leaves the current application in view. The button below it calls up Reason here and switches the application to Reason. And it's the same for all of those buttons that are there. And that has actually been very handy. If you're starting off at the beginning of the day, you'll start here at the home page, and if nothing is running and I want to start working in Reason, I just hit that and it automatically launches Reason and takes me here to the first page, which is not quite the right page, is it? There, mixer, rack, sequencer. Yep, that's how that's set up to work. So it starts me out here, and I have my zoom buttons. Oh my gosh, this is my favorite thing. Let me just go back to a song that has stuff going on. In the sequencer, just the zoom in and zoom out and the up and down, I can never remember those key commands. Then the zoom to selection, This won't be exciting, but zoom to selection, zoom in and out. So having those buttons there, oh gosh, that is such a time saver. Those are probably the buttons I use the most over time besides these three. I've gotten into the habit of using the three mixer, rack, and sequencer buttons because that allows me to have access to the other commands that I need that I would only need in the sequencer, like the zoom, or only need in what would be the rack, like a load. Although you can load devices in the sequencer as well. So that's not a bad thing either. Let's see, put something after. Oh, but my button isn't there. Dang it. So I'll have to figure that out. I have to go here, load, and then oh, that was my sleeve hitting the space bar, by the way, because where the Stream Deck is located right in front of my keyboard here, that is a common thing I've got to be careful of. What I probably need to do is have the Stream Deck a little higher. So that means I have to go to the sequencer, and then I can add a device like Thor there or redrum. Okay, that works, but I need the buttons to be in the same place. Now I wonder, I'll have to check this out. I would love it if I could put a button in the sequencer that went to the same folder and not have to recreate the folder and keep that in sync. So I'll be exploring all that, I'm sure, and I'm just reporting in that this has been just a great addition to my setup. Especially the buttons that give me feedback, like these. And the click. Oh, that's because we have a mastering. Yeah, why doesn't the click stay in sync? Because the mastering plugin has so much latency. Zoom. And that's another one that I'm actually finding handy when I'm doing combinator development, is that applications zoom quickly in and out. Okay, well, I'm going to finish up early today, it looks like, because, oh, I forgot to put loop on. Because I have finished up. And I will, oh, tell me, somebody's talking about using Touch Portal. Hans. So I looked into that and I almost did that, and the only thing that kept me from doing that was hardware and not having an iPad or a phone dedicated to that. So way more expensive going this route, but I really like the instantaneous hardware feel. The fact that I can be looking one place and kind of keep my hand hovered over the buttons and say, I know where play and stop are. I don't even have to look. I can just listen or rewind or go back to a section or do things that I can work the way I used to work on hardware, which is a lot less using my eyes and a lot more using my ears. And I know everyone says, use your ears. Well, you have to. You don't have to exclusively use your ears. And as you saw, I am all about the visual tools for sure. I don't shy away from using them, but when it comes down to it, I try to listen first. Oh, let me leave with one more quick tip. I don't know if I can fit this in quickly, so I'll try. It's something that I've done all my life, and I think I've put it into text before or a post somewhere, but I haven't included it yet in the live stream. And what that technique is, let's say you're setting a knob on a device, a compressor. Let's say maybe it's something you're not clear, attack or release or ratio. Threshold's pretty easy to get early on. The others are not quite easy. Or maybe it's just decay time of a reverb that you're using, and you're turning the knob and you're just hearing a lot of it sounds good, but some of it is obviously, well, this is way too long and this is way too short. So that's basically what I do. I find the place that's still too short, how far can I go when it's still too short? Okay, mark that. Maybe that's like 10 o'clock on the knob. Then I increase it to where it's way too long, and let's say that's like 2 o'clock on the knob. Halfway between those two is 12 o'clock, and that's where I'll put the knob to start with when I'm not sure, especially when working with a new device. What that does is it eliminates over 50% of the possible positions from consideration. I don't have to listen to 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock on the dial, because I already know those are too long and too short. So that means for any control I'm looking at, instead of it being where do I set it, now I know between here and there, and if I'm really still confused, just put it halfway and see what that sounds like. Then you can fish around a little from there, bump it up a little or bump it down a little if you're thinking maybe it's too long, make it a little shorter, but you know that you're in the right range. And this also works when mixing, setting your basic levels. And because I remember the first time I sat down with an acoustic guitar on one fader and a vocal on another. This was on the SSL, the first studio job, the Castle out in Franklin, Tennessee. And I was very new, and it was my first time alone, and I'm like, that sounds good, that sounds good, that sounds good, that sounds good. Where do I put them? There's only two. That's what blew my mind, was frustratingly enough, if I can't figure out where to put two things, what happens when I have 48? I'm looking at a 48 input console thinking, we have enough tape tracks to do 48 here. Wow, how am I ever gonna learn this? And so I started to do the same thing basically. There was, okay, this is too loud and this is too soft. And I'm sure of those two things. So that inch between too loud and too soft is where I'm gonna end up. And just thinking about it that way meant that all of a sudden this huge expanse of real estate, which it's not that huge, but it felt huge to me at the time, is now much smaller, and now I'm much closer to finding where this thing should be, and it's a lot less intimidating. So it's basically, the concept is eliminate, the process of elimination, I guess, is the classic phrase, and it's eliminate all the variables you can. And so those include the extremes of the settings, and once you've narrowed it down, it's still gonna be a little bit of work, but it's a whole lot less work, and it becomes a doable task rather than a insurmountable mountain. So hopefully that's a positive note that I'm leaving you on today. Let's put the congas back in for fun. Which reminds me, I sent this beat off without the congas in. I might have to add them later. And I'll just leave you with this one, and I'll see you the next second Thursday of February, whenever that is. And until then, go make some music.